him in Senate, and of course myself, we went to the school. So if I may introduce myself, school number 6177.
According to these fellows.
So Karibu will give you we've been giving others about 20 minutes, but we want to propose we give you 10 minutes because we have a very heavy day today. You endeavor so that if you extend your 10 minutes, we go to about 15, and maybe 5 minutes for a few interventions here and there. Karibu.
10 minutes too short for Attorney General Emeritus, Senator Emeritus, and one who went to this school, and he was number 1,700, and one was just flown in just to appear and fly out. So please give me time and be with me, because I think that your committee is very important. I thank you for inviting me to give my views to this important national dialogue. It is my prayer that you fully discharge your mandate for the well-being of our beloved country of ours depends on the issues you have identified for negotiations being successfully resolved. Let me start with the easiest, establishment and entrenchment of the state offices. I support. And in fact, way back in April 1992, I published a constitutional amendment to have that office plus 2 deputy governors. And as you know, during the national negotiations, which happened in 2007-8, again, we established that office. And as you also know, during the BPI process, mark you, the BPI was only challenged on procedure, how it was appointed. But the content of BPI are still there, and you can make reference to them. And the BPI, we did draft a constitutional amendment, and if you look at Article 107A, there we have provided for leader of opposition. And if you look at Part 2A, there we have provided for the post of Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, which of course now is Prime Cabinet Secretary. Outstanding issues. Article 43 of the Constitution. Article 43 of the Constitution gives us economic and social rights. That particular article is similar to, and in fact I know I drafted it during the committee stage where I was a member. We borrowed from the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Therefore, the first thing which is important on that is to recognize that the primary responsibility to realize these rights lies on the government. A democratically elected government would have been voted into office on the basis of the manifesto and the pronouncement of its leaders on the policies and programs they would put in place to realize these rights once elected. The second point to take into account is that it is accepted that these rights are not immediately achievable due to the many reasons, including insufficient resources. Therefore, the responsibility on the shoulders of the government is to achieve these rights progressively. And there, the word progressively has been used both in our Constitution, Article 21(2) of the Constitution, if you read it, and also in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, to which Kenya is a party. So, it is there. The number one issue, as you know, in Kenya today is the unprecedented high cost of living, which is causing unbearable suffering, misery, anxiety, and hunger among the populace in Kenya. As a prominent church leader has stated, we are strangling the lives of the poor Kenyans. History is replete with examples where people in countries facing a national crisis come together to fight the threat. Mwalimu Julius Nyerere used to say that just as in UK, for example, everybody came together to face the threat to the nation caused by Germany, which led to the Second World War. So we in Africa are in a state of war, and it is a war against ignorance, poverty, and disease. And this war can only be won if we all come together. In this national crisis, it calls on the government and all the people to humble themselves and collectively and in a sober manner address the issue. I am therefore suggesting to this National Dialogue Committee that a national consultation on the national economic crisis be convened to come up with recommendations not only to ameliorate the high cost living costs, but also make people better understand the bitter medicine and hard decisions that must be taken to put the economy on the right track. Such a national consultation should include political leaders, religious leaders, professionals, economists, business and farming communities, opinion makers, etc. The national consultation should be convened immediately your report is approved by Parliament. Let me take this opportunity also to make reference to Article 204, since it touches on Article 43. And Article 204 provides for equalization of equalization funds, but it is targeted at groups which were discriminated against during the colonial time. And although marginalized areas is not defined in the Constitution, marginalized community is defined, and it makes reference to traditional community or indigenous community, etc. Since independence, we now have recent areas where one can say they are marginalized. And here I'm referring to, for example, slums in the urban areas have really spread. And now these slums are spreading into the rural areas where the living conditions are deplorable. I therefore recommend that a poverty alleviation fund be created to address the economic and social needs of the vulnerable groups in such areas. This will be implementing Article 43 as read with Article 21(3) of the Constitution, which makes specific reference to special measures being taken to assist the vulnerable people. And we don't have a specific fund for that. Of course, one can argue that every government program is addressing that issue. But we have indigent Kenyans who are really suffering, and such a fund can focus itself on such people. Implementation of the 2/3 gender rule. There have been failed attempts to achieve the 2/3 gender rule. I do recall that in many of the drafts of the proposed constitution, a clause similar to Article 1772 of the Constitution, which applies to gender top-up in county assemblies after elections, depending on the number of persons elected, was provided for to apply to the National Assembly and the Senate. Somehow, although it was a draft in the process of discussions and so on, somehow that clause was removed. and that clause only remained in reference to county assembly. I just recommend that an article similar to Article 1772 be reintroduced to apply to the National Assembly and the Senate. This should be accompanied by a carrot and stick approach, particularly in policies and programs and legislation aimed at political parties, to encourage them to nominate women to elective seats in their strongholds. This will aim at having more women elected parliamentarians so that the top-up figure will be reduced and in the long run, hopefully eliminated. Electoral justice and related matters, restructuring and reconstitution of IEBC. This is a complex issue which demands that we think out of the box. This country has had basically three ways of appointing commissioners. The first is the government-controlled commission. Up to May 1992, the Electoral Commission was basically under the government. The Electoral Commission had, in fact, by a legal notice, delegated its constitutional function of conducting or supervising elections to the Attorney General, who had an officer in his office called the Supervisor of Elections, who in turn appointed district commissioners as returning officers. And when I became Attorney General, I was basically also now the chairman of the Electoral Commission. I was in charge of the elections in this Republic of Kenya. But I can tell you that I revoked that legal notice and restored the function of conducting elections to its rightful place, although the president continued to appoint the commissioners. Just before I revoked the legal notice, I was surprised when I was invaded in my office by all the opposition political parties and the leaders at around 6:37 p.m. as I was working. And I believe they came because of the Attorney General, but also because I was the person in charge of elections. They came with their key supporters. I don't know if they can, I think most of you are young, not to have been among the key supporters at that time. I can't think. I think a lot of shock, I think, the only one who may qualify is.
I don't think I was there. This untimely and godly hour.
After the one was serious, I was student in Moi University, I think, at that time, or maybe in some primary school in Mombasa. This was now in May of 1992. All the opposition political parties plus their key supporters came to my office and made it clear to me that I convey to the president that he disbands the Electoral Commission immediately and new members appointed with their involvement. In other words, they wanted to propose members and the president appoints. Of course, the clarion call at that time was no new Electoral Commission, no elections. To cut the long story short, and that would one day appear in my memoirs, in an extenso, we discussed up to about 10 p.m. and they agreed with my proposal, which was in accordance with the Constitution as it was then. The proposal was that although the president had no constitutional powers to disband the commission once appointed, however, the Constitution at that time provided only a minimum of members of the Electoral Commission. So consequently, he could appoint additional members. So I say the way I can help them is through that way, or advise the government. So we agreed that they should go and nominate, give me a list of persons from whom the president can, in his absolute discretion, appoint. I informed them that such persons should not be officials of the political party or any party, or be active members of their party or any party, or be persons known to belong to their party or any party. Furthermore, such persons should be persons of integrity, well respected in society, persons who had retired honorably from public or private sectors, or well-known senior professionals, or persons known for their independence of mind. In short, they should be persons of gravitas. As Nigerians would say, persons of legal luminaries. In view of the constitutional discretion vested in the president, I asked each leader not to give me a list where they have all sat down and agreed, but each leader had to submit a list to me separately. I can tell you, within 2 days, I received from each letter suggesting, in fact, there was no list which had suggested names of under 12. Some had 16, 14, 15, whatever. And the letters, I can tell you, must be there in the Attorney General's office, were actually signed by the leaders, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Honorable Mwai Kibaki, Kijana Wamalwa, Martin Shikuku, and so on and so on. At that time, we were dealing with about 9 opposition political parties, but these were the major ones. And the leaders applied their mind to it and produced those lists. That point is going to be important on how a political party can nominate. It should really be at a very high level, under the signature of the president, party leader, and so on. Now, I examined all those letters. I can tell you that 3 or 4 names appeared in nearly all the lists. 3 or 4 names. My memory is going short, but I know Margaret Kenyatta was one of them who appeared in almost all the lists. There was Harry Mule, a former PS Treasury, again, whose name appeared in nearly all the lists. And there were others. I can tell you the president, when I showed him and analyzed the situation, had no problem whatsoever in appointing the names which were common in all the lists. And that's how the additional names to the Electoral Commission were appointed, in addition to those already appointed by the president earlier. After the IPPG of 1997, it was agreed that KANU nominate for appointment 11, and the opposition parties nominate for appointment 10, and they did so. And the Electoral Commission was the largest I ever known, had 21 members. You know, elected or appointed by the president on the nomination of political parties, direct nominations, political parties. And like before, in my situation where I said, give me a number of names and we shall decide from there. They were just appointing a name and that is it. Of course, you'll agree with me that 21 members are a bit unwieldy. But let me remind you that this is the Electoral Commission which delivered the 2002 general elections, whose results were uploaded and accepted locally here in Kenya, regionally and internationally. And I believe it was the only general election in the multi-party era, and that is after we amended the constitution, where no election petition was filed challenging the election of the president. So what I'm trying to say, when you're considering these issues in a sober manner, don't try to demonize the fact that political parties should not nominate. I think that should be on the table, because our user has shown it, as I've seen it. The chairman, yeah. So, I mentioned about the first government control electoral commission, the second commissions nominated by political parties. And now the third is what we have been experiencing since in 2007. The third is the so-called commissions which are expert-based, where the election board, through advertising, interviewing, and selecting the members on merit. This has been Kenya's experience under the new constitution. This looks good on paper and has many points in its favor. However, the electoral commission so appointed have not inspired confidence up to now. But its major merit is that the members are supposed to be experts, they are non-partisan, and not affiliated to a political party. However, we have noticed that the selection board, they rarely agree, even on method of scoring points, and that method can also be interfered with by ensuring that a member gives very high points to the one he favors and very low to the one he doesn't like, so that when it comes to average, somebody goes through. And in fact, I believe you have heard here allegations that even on the last electoral commission, some of the commissioners, although it was through that system, that some of the commissioners were appointed as a result of maneuverings by certain political powers or political or eminent politicians. So it can also be manipulated, in other words. To cut a long story short, what is my proposal? My proposal and recommendations, having studied the three matters of appointing commissioners, is that we have a mixed system of some commissioners nominated by political parties and some commissioners appointed through a refined system that we now have. In this way, the benefits from both ways can be realized. I suggest, what I'm suggesting here can be refined in further discussions, particularly amongst you and amongst the political parties and other key stakeholders. I suggest that the top 2 or 3 political parties should nominate people for appointment, direct appointment to the Electoral Commission. And they should, the top 2 or 3 should nominate 1 commissioner each. And the rest of the political parties should jointly nominate 1. The persons to be nominated, that's a procedure, by the political parties should meet the set criteria, which I've already mentioned, is the criteria that I used and which the political party leaders accepted and which they implemented because they gave me real proper names. People of integrity, well-known reputation and whatnot. They gave me those names, and out of which we appointed that criteria can be used by the political parties in suggesting the names. This can, of course, be refined properly. This will enable the Commission to have persons of gravitas and also experts. The persons of gravitas, you see, people who, if you appoint, they can just say, yeah, that one they agree, you know. Such a person, I can tell you, is not likely to apply and be subjected for shortlisting and for appearing before a panel of youngsters and whatnot and so on. He will not. But such a person can only be appointed by elder statesmen who are the party leaders or leaders of a coalition of parties, just directly without any problem. So this system will enable such persons to be appointed rather than this other system that we are having. And so once the political parties are appointed, then the balance of the commission can be appointed through the system that we have with proper amendments to take care of the weaknesses that we have seen them have. So that's what I would suggest on the issue of reconstituting the commission. And probably the political parties liaison committee, constituted under Article 38 of the Political Parties Act, could play a role, and therefore the Act should be amended for it to play that role. The other suggestions I would suggest under this is that we are taking into account the decisions of the Supreme Court in the various election petitions and so on how the EC operates and functions. Some amendments ought to be made to the various laws to make clear that the chairman of the Electoral Commission does not act on his own, but he acts on the decision of the Commission, on a decision that collectively arrived at. And that before even they announce the presidential elections, they must then have looked at Form 34C, which shows the results of the presidential elections, and not just a summary of what the result of each county. That's not a verification, that's not tallying. But that law needs to be tightened so that we are on proper footing. The other point under the, you had me to address you on was audit of the 2022 presidential election. The Supreme Court has exclusive jurisdiction to hear and determine disputes relating to the elections to the office of the President. And his decision is final, Article 142. To my mind, the audit cannot change or reverse the decision of the Supreme Court through a constitutional and legal process. The audit is like a post-mortem, which cannot revive a dead body, but can tell you the cause of the death. And that's what we want to know in this audit. We want to know and identify the shortcomings, the weaknesses, the loopholes, or the shortfalls which should be rectified before the next election. In fact, this is the only way you can improve on the electoral processes and instill confidence of the people in it. in my mind, in fact, such audits that we are asking for, it should be held after every general election, proper audit, so that we can progressively improve our electoral systems. Many election observers have observed that normally the election process up to the polling day was credible and counting in the polling stations was technically professional. The problem lies in tallying, tabulation, and declaration of results. The issue of whether or not the server should be opened has engaged the public debate for some time now. The more debate on this matter goes on, the more suspicions are created or raised that where there is no smoke, there must be some fire. This has left a doubt or a lingering thought in the minds of people that it may not be that the figures in the portal are different from the figures in the server. That it may not be, but it could be so. And this may repeat itself in the next election. If the same is not cleared, if these doubts are not cleared, it could erode confidence in future elections and reduce the figure of people participating in such elections. I am therefore recommending and proposing that a law should be enacted to make servers automatically open and accessible to anyone, that as soon as the presidential elections are declared. In other words, as soon as the presidential elections are declared, and that's normally the last to be declared, the server should be open, and it should be open and accessible to whoever wants to access it. Rather than these arguments we have been having in 2013, 2017, with the court, go and open the observer. Oh, we cannot open because of some foreign company has some rights, I don't know, intellectual rights over it. We can't just interfere. I think it should be very clear to whoever comes to assist us that the servers will be open. And we can only do that if we make it law that the server will be open as soon as the results are declared. And will be accessible to every person. And even those who want to file petitions now, they can use it, the information there to file their petitions. Last, permit me, I'm a Pan-Africanist, and I've been a Pan-Africanist since I was in intermediate school, before I went to Alliance High School in the area of Mheshimiwa. But I've taken notice of the fact that the leaders of the two coalitions which constitute this committee are believers, are also Pan-Africanists, and believers in the greater political, economic, social integration of East Africa, and indeed Africa region as a whole, as a stepping stone for faster economic development for the benefit of our people. But what I'm going to say again is relevant to Article 43, is relevant to the rising costs, is relevant to stabilizing our economy and making sure that it can take off, can grow at an accelerated pace. In BBI, we recommended an amendment to the Constitution, and we had a new Article 10A, which reads as follows. 10A, regional integration and cohesion. This constitution embraces the goals of African unity and political confederation of the Eastern Africa region as integral towards attainment of sustainable development, prosperity for all, and stability. So I'm recommending to you that you also recommend such a clause in terms of the economic and social rights, that we also have that clause in our constitution. That was my little thing. Now, just for the verbal thing, number one, I looked at your terms of reference, and I wasn't sure whether you can recommend additional or reduction of counties. I was not very sure on that. And therefore I did not write my thoughts down. But since it appeared before you, just on the off the cuff, I can tell you that that's a very sensitive matter. I can say in a sense I was sort of responsible for the 47 counties, because if you follow the arguments at that time, some were suggesting over 100, some were suggesting about 14, some were suggesting 18, and there was no way forward. But when I suggested that we just follow the districts which had been recognized in law, in the independent and boundaries on the Provincial and District Boundaries Act, which I piloted through Parliament in 1992, that we just accept that as a model, and so there are 47 counties, everybody agreed, and we have 47 counties. Now to take the very brave step to add, or take a very brave step to deduct, I suggest it's not a matter that can be lightly handled through a committee which has limited time and which has more pressing, important issues to decide. And therefore, I suggest that if you think that there's a merit in either adding and either reducing, maybe you recommend that the matter be separately handled properly by another body or whatever, people to look into the matter more carefully. That's number two. I also had some suggestions, but I think here you are within your mandate. I have been a senator, and I'm glad the leader of majority is here. He worked very well, and he has really matured over a very short time. He keeps a very young man and he has matured so quickly. And actually, there are two senators. One is him, and the other one is now the governor of Nandi. I have followed their career, and they have done very well. And I must pay a tribute for the system that allows such young people to come up and progress. I feel that if you have the time, you look into the place of the Senate. And I believe the place of the Senate should be strengthened in terms of legislation and in terms of everything else. And I also do support the Senate Oversight Fund should be done. Look again, Abe, on this one, if you so wish, I could write something and hand it over to you within a limited time on how the Senate could be strengthened. Because this is really something that's very close to my heart. And I think with that, if there's anything else you want me to address on, I can do it. But those were my initial thoughts. And thank you, Chairman, for being kind to me in not interrupting me. When I passed the 10-minute mark, I was looking at you very carefully. But as you know, strong to serve is our motto.
Thank you, AG Emeritus, Senator Amos Wako. And indeed, strong to serve. That is why I could not muster the guts to interrupt you. And we definitely benefit from your immense knowledge and experience in government, and also in your later life as a legislator. We'll have a short plenary. Maybe if I may start, before I give someone else. You have spoken to an audit, which in my interpretation looks like you're speaking about an audit of the process, electoral process, or rather an evaluation of the electoral process as provided for in the Constitution, rather than what you have said, an audit of the election, and I believe election results would be like a post-mortem that you have said is like trying to resuscitate a dead body. Then if it is a process, how would you then propose that that electoral process be evaluated after every election? Because what I've heard you say is that you would want to see a system where there is an evaluation or an audit of the electoral process with a view to improving that process. And I think that's what, in my interpretation of reading of the Constitution, the drafters of the Constitution envisage, that after every election we shall be able to evaluate and see where can we improve on the processes to ensure that we have a credible electoral process. How would you suggest that that be done? By which body? Is it IBC, or which other body would you propose that they do that review of the Constitution? You have also spoken to direct appointments and put a very strong case for direct appointments of commissioners. Where does that sit in view of the new Constitution of 2010? Because granted that the experience you are speaking about is before this new Constitution, which requires that we have a very fair, competitive process where people are given jobs on merit. Where would your proposal then to have direct appointments proposed by party leaders like Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka here, who is a party leader and a former vice president, and Honorable Eugene Wamalwa is also a party leader. There are party leaders who, at least Honorable Eugene's party has, I think, about 5 members of parliament and a number of county assembly members. They are party leaders without a single MCA, a single member of parliament or a senator or any elected official. And I could form a party, like we have given the case example of UDA that we was forming about a year before the election, but today is the largest political party. Shall we not be disadvantaging those who are not yet party leaders, those who are yet to form parties, and therefore advantaging the likes of Eugene, Honorable Kalonzo, and other party leaders who already have established political parties? And would that fly directly contra the Constitution in terms of being discriminative? Maybe Your Excellency can go first, then Omar. Who else has Eugene?
Yeah, it's okay.
That order.
It's very good to see you, Attorney General Emeritus. You talk about the school. But I want to humble myself before you say I was your pupil at Kaplan and Stratton. I like your spirit of regional integration. And of course, that notwithstanding, at some stage I became Vice President, the Attorney General. But that's the nature of things. I know your ability, your commitment to this country. You recall one time you wanted to resign, and I walked up to you and told him, you will not do that in the best interest of this country. You're a man I've seen who has received a lot of beating for being a stickler for the rule of law. Um, 2 points. Like you, and you remember when we had the BBI sittings, I entered appearance and pitched for the role of the Senate. And since we cannot do much other than recommend that this issue be resolved, we heard from I think it was your successor, Professor Gilum Wegai, also pitched for the role of the Senate. And you have one up against him because you've yourself served as a senator. But what I liked about your selection of IB's commissioners, and I don't think it goes necessarily against what Kimani Ichung'wah is arguing, is to think of persons with gravitas. And you say they will never apply. And yet we know these are people who can never be compromised or bought with money. The likes of the late Harry Mole and the first mayor, I think Margaret Kenyatta was, when Mzee Moi that time saw these names, they are not necessarily pro-Kanu, he picked them on your advice. I think the same advice can be given to political parties so that we can get away from this ghost of stolen elections or allegations of stolen elections. So I like that, persons with gravitas, in addition to the experts, because today's expert, look at them, it goes through, by the way, before you came in, the selection panels here, and they were very gracious to the work of this committee, basically open-minded, and we thank them. But this whole thing about people with absolutely no political sense coming in, and they have no feeling whatsoever, and all they do is, and we know, I can tell you, as you know, we've been serious political players in the 2013 election, the 2017, and our 2022, which falls short of what those persons with gravitas achieved in 2002. When in fact, the outcome of that election made the whole world say the country with, I think, the most optimistic nation on earth after 2002 was Kenya. And we continue to build on that goodwill, this country will be very far. So, I just want to agree with you on the persons with gravitas. How you achieve that is something that we probably may want to develop with us, and not necessarily the strength of political. By the way, you're very clear, Kimani may not have listened. You say the major 2 or 3 political parties can present lists, and the others, 1. And you can also look at the existing ones. I mean, the persons perhaps will be worked upon by the selection panel. And then we end up with a product that can deliver this country to the next level when it comes to political party governance. The first thing the only thing I want you to address, because you didn't address it, because the rest of the points are very clear, in fact, absolutely well thought out, is the fidelity to political parties. This aggression on the party that ends up forming government, and in this case, our friends in Kenya Kwanza. You will remember that immediately after elections, Azimio la Umoja One Kenya had the majority of members of parliament. But there are people in this country who do not believe in political party democracy or decency. They want just to be in government. And they went to government and caused a violation of what was even agreed at that time by way of registered coalitions with the registrar of political parties. First of all, what would you recommend with regard to the independence and the strengthening of the role of the office of the registrar of political parties? And again, fidelity to coalitions and coalition arrangements. Because then whoever takes over power at a particular time will say, I want the numbers so that I can carry out my legislative program. But it appears to me if we are to borrow the example of what's happening in the United States today, the Republicans are the majority in Congress, and the American people are teaching us something. You negotiate and even end up like they did last night, say, well, let's leave out this matter of funding the war in Ukraine and look at national interest. And then everybody ends up feeling a bit more accommodated. President Biden is a president on the Democratic Party, but Senator McCarthy, of course, they want to impeach him now. The extremists on Republicans want to impeach him for considering what they've given. But since our Constitution 2010, I'm sure you'll agree, has drawn heavily from the American model, presidential system, I think that it probably will make this country be in good standing if we then can follow some of these ethos and avoid disorganizing, dismantling in a very dismissive manner political parties that take time to put together, coalition arrangements that take time to put together. Of course, the idea of a post-election coalition is also possible, but immediately after an election, in a country as divided as we are, right now divided right in the middle, and then you have a head of state who probably say, I want to stamp great authority. He ends up doing that, but at what cost with regard to political party democracy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since everybody has said something, as a writer before their remarks, I'll also say that my time at the Senate was made extremely useful by the likes of you, the late Haji, Raitu Murungi. You're able to clarify to Junior and I and those who cared to sit down with you a lot of the episodes of history where on the decisions that were taken at that time by the former president and some of the decisions that were made by very great leaders. And you told me that to publish your memoirs, some people have to be dead. So I heard you talk about your memoirs. I'm confident those people are now dead. you actually, that was the joke you had, that if you were to publish your memoirs, some people must not be there. And that meant they must be absent from life, from the earth. Two.
But they have their successors and assigns. Estates could go for him.
You never clarified that. Maybe you can clarify now. Number two, you make a very flowery reference to the elections of 2002, and that there was a bipartisan IBC as a product of the IPPG. But also the margin of victory between Uhuru Kenyatta and the late Mwai Kibaki was so significant that no Tharaka Nithi could turn it around. And in fact, I'm one of those who was very critical of the Moi administration. But one greatest act of statesmanship that is corroborated by both President William Ruto and former head of public service, Sally Koskei, is that when everybody was waiting for Moi to do the magic, the late President Moi asked Uhuru Kenyatta to concede, which led to the concession at Serena. We need to have a culture of conceding elections. Whether we are the country, in terms of margins of victory, it is not specified. The only constitutional threshold that is required is 50 plus 1 vote and 25% in 24 counties. Americans vote that way every successive elections. Ghanaian presidents win with margins of 50,000 or 25,000. But we have radicalized and weaponized some of our base of supporters to constantly deny, to accept victory by always blaming some top technology, some software, some server. Yet it is some of it is in open public gallery for it to be seen. The server or the portal was simply a reflection of the server. We have since been informed by our Supreme Court team that the Supreme Court actually, in 2022, but then after that, we said all elections were contested, and all of them read Raila Odinga and others versus, so the contestation has been from one center. But I wanted to ask I don't know whether you were part of the Supreme Court process of the 2022 elections. Actually, an audit of the server was actually, and we will present it in the deliberations of this committee, was actually ordered by the Supreme Court. Both parties to the suit were actually asked to come. They were taken to those places. Others, even from ODM, had their notes and they wrote, and they all signed onto that report, upon which I'm told it is what informed part of the decision of the Supreme Court. But I totally agree with this proposal that we indeed need to make it law that servers be opened immediately after an election so that we conclude these elections conclusively. We do not need to repeat ourselves constantly that after every election we are putting out some IBC people out of work. We are victimizing and vilifying Kenyans. We are, in the lead up to the elections, we're intimidating them. We are kidnapping them. We are murdering them. And those are some of the things we need to look into. But the final thing I wanted to ask, election cannot be the work of only political parties and politicians. I think all these Kenyans here, including the media, those who work in other sectors, are interested in the outcome of these elections. In fact, the politicians are a very insignificant part of the entire electoral process. But I've had Senator Okongo Mkeni ask about it. Are you aware of the Mozambican model, where the commission is appointed on account of party strength? And it is not usually cited as a best practice because it is in the interest of those commissioners in terms of survival to ensure that the party that nominated them continues to win. And that whole idea is also manifest, unfortunately, in the Cherera Four, who, in our view, were appointed in very close to the elections, who I think had a common plan, who now continue to peddle a common theory that is fairly tired about them not having been called into a commission meeting to decide whether to subvert or affirm the popular will of the Kenyan people. So I wanted you to speak to the partiality of these people who are nominated by political parties, who, in my estimation, are more prone to subvert an election than to affirm it. I think those are though I totally agree with the strengthening of the Senate. It's not only strengthening of the Senate. We must take the courage and deal with this issue once and for all. This is a fallacy. Senate must be the upper house of parliament.
Thank you.
Senate, just a minute, must be the upper house of parliament. How do you get elected in 6 constituencies, 12 constituencies, and then you are told these two houses sit side by side? It's not practical, it's not logical.
Okay, thank you. Eugene?
Chair,
Sorry.
Chair,
Before Eugene, sit like a point of order or something.
Yeah, sort of. But first, let me say my apologies. I came from the Council.
You don't need to.
We had elections of the office bearers for the Council of Governors. But Chair, I'm just concerned that we, the committee, are taking too long to seek clarifications. Chair, you took about 15 minutes. Hassan has taken 15 minutes. There's a whole list of people. So just out of concern, can we go? No,
thank you.
You took long. Could we at least take 2-3 minutes?
That point is taken. Cicely, we hear you.
Yeah.
Please, Eugene.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. The gentleman before us happens to be my namesake. The only thing I blame him for is I think he made the name Amos more popular than Eugene, but his name is actually Amos. Eugene is Wako. And one thing apart from sharing a name with him is that we share a love for Shakespeare. This gentleman with my late brother, true Shakespearean. And your presentation really touches one of Shakespeare's famous lines, to be or not to be, in Hamlet.
Indeed, there's a tide in the affairs of men. This is a tide. There's no catch it at its height.
Yeah.
This country could go hayway. Anyway, continue. Just
yes. So the elephant in the room, and I'm very happy that you've touched on the critical issues. We have about 5 issues. We have 25 days to go. And you are not just speaking to us, you're making recommendations in terms of way forward, and I'm hoping our Secretariat is capturing this. And on each issue, you have left us with a clear recommendation. One of those is the issue of to be opened or not to be opened. To be or not to be opened, the service. That has been a hot political potato. But from what you have said today, I think we can pick a very clear recommendation that this matter should be a matter of course after the elections. Servers should be opened in the interest of transparency and accountability, and also to boost public confidence in our electoral processes, equipment, and everything. So it should not even be an issue that should be left for debate. What I wanted to ask, so that we can tap into your wisdom, is the IBC appeared before us, and we're looking at Article 88. So when you look at Article 88, H, 4H, it's very clear that it is the duty of IEBC, that is on page 40 of our Constitution, at the top, the first line, H. It's actually the cardinal duty of IEBC to ensure facilitation of, first of all, observation, and this they have been doing. They have been observers, facilitated, external observers, monitoring. I don't know if you've gotten it. 88, 4H. 88? 4H. 4. Yeah, in my copy, it's on page 40. The first sentence at the top. Oh, mine is 4H. No, I came with it. Oh, my goodness. Are you looking at 88? No, I came with the wrong.
Maybe the Secretariat can help you with the latest copy. But basically, there are three things the IEBC is supposed to do to facilitate observation, and observers have been facilitated. To facilitate monitoring, that has been done externally. And from what you're proposing, the issue is evaluation of elections, where IBC has been doing it, by themselves, and we had asked them whether this is not just self-appraisal. If we were to go by that provision of Article 88 4H in terms of evaluation of the elections, and to take your recommendation, and there are those who came before you who also recommended amendment, so that it is provided in our law that there will be that audit done immediately after elections, servers opened automatically. Would that fall within your recommendation? And that you can make in your further written submissions. You can look at the law, and it will help this committee in terms of those recommendations. Then the other issue that you have made a very clear recommendation on, and I hope our Secretariat has captured it. So the issue of counties, that's a very sensitive issue. You were the AG, I think when we had the Akiwomi report, you did make your advice to that commission, and the tribal clashes of 92, 97, and whatever happened. So in terms of adding or subtracting, to have or not to have more counties, it's another hot political potato, and we are happy with your recommendation that perhaps we will not be looking at whether the matter is within our jurisdiction or it's beyond our mandate, as per the motion passed by Parliament. And therefore, recommendation, what I wanted your advice on, maybe when you're making your recommendation, whether that can fall within, of course, the purview of Article 188, where it's required that Parliament handles the issue of creation of new borders, counties and whatever. That will be very helpful in terms of a way forward and in terms of recommendations. Lastly, we have the issue of course,
the two-thirds gender rule. We are looking for that clause that disappeared. I think you are saying that could really resolve the situation of the two-thirds gender rule. Because in the county assemblies, because of the law that we put there, Article 177, we have achieved in all our 47 county assemblies. But in our National Assembly and I think Parliament, we have a problem. I think you can help us find the clause that disappeared that could have actually resolved this. Be more specific in terms of recommending so that we can pick it as part of a recommendation to resolve that issue. And lastly, the issue of Article 43 and matters of socioeconomic rights. That also, I think you made some very, very good recommendations. It's an issue that, of course, our colleagues in Kenya Kwanza didn't want on the table. But you're saying there is, it's a national crisis. Kenyan suffering don't belong to Kenya Kwanza or Azimio. They are all Kenyans suffering, regardless of how they voted. So there was the recommendation you were making about a national consultation, NCG. I think that's a very good recommendation, which I'm hoping will also capture. But what I wanted to ask is, I think during Kibaki's time, when we had this economic crisis, Kibaki came up with the economic recovery strategy and a team that was tasked to actually address the crisis at the time. I remember during Moi's time, when we had a similar crisis, he came up with a dream team that included people who are not even his supporters, a cross-cutting team of experts and people like Leakey and others who didn't agree with him politically, but a team that would be brought together broad-based and with the necessary expertise, economic and legal luminaries, if that could actually be recommended, so that we say it is no longer Kenya Kwanza affair, it's a national crisis we are facing. Let's come together and let's reason together.
Well, thank you. Maybe we give you time to respond now. Because in the interest of time and what Cicely was reminding us of, I think it's good. And again, thank you. We are not raising any issues. I think we're very clear.
Mine was just to
I thought you
raised a very important issue on the issue of bicameral house vis-a-vis the Senate.
It was very clear.
I wanted to make a small request that you don't make it off the cuff. You send us a write-up on your thoughts.
Yeah.
I'd actually given him one myself when they were sitting at KICC. Maybe just to enrich it and see what we can do. Over to you, Amos Wako.
I wish to, my eyes are Mose. I'll start with which text should he use. Let me use this one so that I'm not now seeing it clearly. First of all, let me thank you for the comments you have made, which have all been very positive, and that's the way it should be. Mr. Chairman, your committee can even make proposals for amendment. I do not think that the proposal that political parties appoint in any way contradicts the Constitution, but if you feel it somehow it contradicts the Constitution, but you like the idea, then you can do a slight amendment. And if you want me to help you, I can do it. Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, I just wish to confirm that there was a point when I thought I'd had enough and I wanted to sign. And actually, I'd gotten good jobs somewhere. But he came. My friend came. He was, of course, my pupil before he became an advocate. So he was now taking care of his master, both spiritually and whatever. He came and really with a long discussion, and he convinced me not to resign. And that's why I continued. At that time, continued in the next regime, and continued to make a record of 20 years over as Attorney General. And I'm always grateful to you for that. And that's what I've made. I don't know where I would be now if I had made that decision to quit. Honorable Kalonzo, you asked about fidelity to political parties. To me, the situation to me, or that one is very, very clear. Kenya is a multi-party democratic state, and anything that undermines that should not be acceptable. But more important to me is that wananchi, the people, the sovereignty of this country rests in the people. And the people, you have gone to them and you have said that I'm now in this party, these are my programs, and on the basis of that, they have elected you. And maybe you decided to stand on that party because you knew that party was popular in that area. And therefore, for you to be elected, you must be a member of that committee. So you are going there under false pretenses to be elected, and then soon after election to go somewhere else. That is the exception to the people of this country. And we should be very firm on it. I agree with my, if you go to the parliamentary record, what Tom Boyer said when in the parliament, when they brought up that law that if you resign from the party which elected you, then you must go back to the people and have a by-election. I agree entirely with what Thomas Joseph Boyer said. You should have the courage just to resign and go, rather than say, I will not go. I'll use the processes of the tribunal or the court and so on. And by the time they decide, my time will be over. I've heard such statements being made. And really, that is arrogance, impunity of the highest order. For you to sort of agree, I've left. And you are now on the other side. And then you say, but nothing will happen to me because I'll use the system to stay where I am now until the next election. You know, it's a gross abuse of the system that is there. And such approach should be discouraged and discouraged completely, to me. So, we should make it easier for such people to resign, and not make it not so much for such people to resign, but we should make it easier for the institutions that deal with such matters to make quick decisions, and if there need be a by-election, let it be a by-election, rather than boasting that we are going to use the courts, the tribunals, and so on, which will take you round and round until the 4 or 5 years are over. Really, all of us around this room, we should detest that type of approach to our politics. We are not maturing enough. By now we should have matured enough. Not even to say that should be an embarrassment to yourself. And they say so again with the pride. This is wrong. This is the rotten part of our Kenyan politics is really that. So I think I've answered you, Musyoka, that one. Dr. Lumari, yeah, thank you very much. We have been together for many years, Safari Park particularly, and so on. And the comments we made about 2002 elections, the margin of victory was such that they could not be tampered with. Who tells you that? I've been in the system. If I wanted to tamper with that, I would have done it. We have a recent example here in Gabon. Gabon, what happened? Did the Electoral Commission announce some so and so has won. But when they opened the server, what happened? And yet the result of the election announced in Gabon, the gap was so wider than the 2002 elections. I think it was something like 17% versus 7%, but they had done it. I'm just saying this to give credit. Let's give the credit where it is due, that the Electoral Commission did a good job in that election and announced the results which reflected the wishes of the people of Kenya. And that Electoral Commission was actually composed of people, commissioners, nominated by political parties of the day, and therefore it's possible. Now, when you say that people nominated by parties will be partial and so on, yeah, it's true. But you see, if you don't give political parties, particularly the 2-3 big ones, that chance to nominate their own people, if they have to go into the system of maneuvering, manipulating the selection system to make sure that the person is there, the type of person they'll nominate will not be a person of gravitas. It will be a sycophant, and therefore he'll be influencing. He'll be there to disturb the situation and so on. So that's why it's good just to accept the situation the way it is. Say, you are the big guys, nominate. But there should be people of gravitas, and they will do so. Rather than making them go under the table, manipulating, and making sure that their sycophants are nominated. This question. But anyway, thank you very much for putting order in the discussions. I can tell you that President Madira is the governor of Embu. We also have a claim on her in Busia. Yes. So we are very proud of her in Busia also. And then, Eugene Wamadwa, you mentioned quite a number of things which, in a sense, I agree with. Actually, it was agreeing with my recommendations, but also suggesting a few things. This Article 884H, I think it can be used, but it will be useful if there was a clear clause to say that after every general election there'll be that. Opening. Yeah, make it clear rather than just a general. I think that's basically what. Anything else?
Well, thank you.
But I can say I'm available.
Yeah, thank you. Please enrich our thinking. Including, by the way, this thing, Zambians went, and I think at some stage, Hassan and referring to, again, talk about Frelimo experience in Mozambique and Renemo. But Zambians have actually decided, rather than this electronic transmission, they will do it manually. I don't want you to answer now, but perhaps give it some thought. Give it some thought.
But then you didn't answer whether you were in that petition as one of the lawyers in that Mio.
Which one?
That Mio petition.
No, not.
He wasn't.
Honorable Co-Chair, just to thank the Honorable Attorney General Emeritus. He's actually flown in from, he was out of the country at a family tragedy, and he just flew in for this. And we must really, really appreciate. And we've taken up a lot of your time. In fact, speaking from your brains, we should have paid you your hefty fee notes. But because of your patriotism, and your colleague, Honorable Gidu Muigai, was here also, this committee benefited greatly. We hope the sitting AG will also have time to come and, you're adding value to our process. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, my pupil master.
So we get your item.
Yeah?
We get your item.
Oh, yeah. I think Okonko, Ogena has asked for a write-up. If the chairman so orders me
Yes,
to.
please do. We wouldn't mind on the issue of the camera house.
Yeah, I'll be more than
I am certain Senator Mugeni is interested more on more powers getting to the Senate. And we shall allow it.
If you can give me 14 days. Or that's too much.
We have a balance of 25 days as a committee.
Well,
You can do 7 days.
7 days?
No, as Eugene, my namesake, I confirm that I'm also called Eugene.
For the record.
I think it sort of indicated to you that Nikona Huku.
I think you can do.
14, fine.
Okay, but in the fact that you also took time from outside the country to appear, would allow you the 14 days.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Asante sana. We have members. We have Kipra next. We still have a group of senators, Enoch Wambua and Tom Ojenda and Ledamo Onekina. We have agreed to allow the Ogia community 10 minutes. And we have agreed with them strictly 10 minutes because of time. And we still have another 4